Okay, I said I was going to come to you with more brain and more energy today. Sassafras had different ideas, so I'm coming to you with exactly the same amount of brain and energy, but with another layer. I got news this morning of a childhood friend's death. It was an unexpected death. And I thought about not making a video, but then I decided that I am going to go ahead. I believe in the totality of the human experience, and I believe in showing up for your friends and for yourself, if you possibly can, in all your different iterations. And so I wanted to model that for myself, I guess. And if it's useful to you, that's great. What have we got so far? We have got this new model of the human brain. Logic has had a kind of stranglehold on definitely the education experience of most Westerners. And people have been berated for not being logical enough. And this goes back to Plato. And how are you going to keep 30 children in order if you don't have some kind of dominant way of keeping them under control? So, the right side of the brain is much messier and much more curious and inventive, and we lose a lot of that by the time we get to high school. So, kindergarten, you're still allowed to do lots of right brain stuff, and you create a lot of stuff. You make finger paintings, you have this tactile connection with plasticine and Play-Doh and paint, and you are allowed to explore different things when you're very little, and that gradually gets narrowed down and down and down, and it gets relegated to play. But in fact, it's a complete right brain exercise, and it turns out we need both sides of the brain, because the logic sees just the facts. The emotional side of the brain sees patterns and connections and synchronizes things. And so you need to have this part of your brain fully engaged when you're writing. What else have we got? We have got this idea that your main protagonist has got a flaw if you're talking about the hero's journey, or as Lisa Cron, who wrote Story Genius, relabeled it, a misbelief. A foundational misbelief that they are going to, if it's a comedy or a drama, they're going to overcome that misbelief at the end. And if it is tragedy or horror, maybe, they are not going to overcome their misbelief. They're going to double down and double down and double down on their misbelief, and they're finally not going to overcome it. The downbeat ending to the novel does not at the moment sell as well. I can think of some examples that have done very, very well, but if you are making a scattergraph of everything that's in the market and how it sells, the upbeat ending where the character has a misbelief, the plot hits their misbelief and challenges it, and they have to do something that's outside their comfort zone, and then they hit it again, and they have to do something that's outside their comfort zone, and by the end, they no longer have that misbelief. They have overcome their misbelief, and they are in a different state. They have kind of bloomed into themselves, and that arc sells much more than a downbeat arc, which is not to say that they don't sell, they just don't sell as much. There are also flat arcs. So if you look at, say, for example, superhero stories or action movies, they tend to have a much flatter arc. But that doesn't mean that your characters don't have flaws. They're not the same as a misbelief, and they might not be something that changes. So, Bond doesn't really change, but they do have flaws because you want to make them compelling characters that are whole, that are not one-dimensional. I've got a few recommendations to make. This is a terrific book. It was not written for writers, but I think it's something great to have on your shelf. If you like studying this stuff, I love studying this stuff. And so any pointers that I can get that deepen my understanding of the human experience, I'm going to go for it. You might not, but this is really terrific. Other really terrific things I've mentioned the emotional wound thesaurus, which I think is another must-have for your shelf, for your craft shelf. It's really, really good. Also, same authors, the positive trait thesaurus. If you just take a look at so really, really in-depth analysis of what it looks like when your characters have certain traits. They go into, definition of what the trait is, categories, similar attributes, possible causes, and then they've got this whole page of associated behaviors. If you are a plotter, that could be a really good place to brainstorm. If you're looking at the soggy second, you know where you start out, you know what their misbelief is, so you already know the end. The end is written into the beginning because if they're going to overcome or not overcome that misbelief, so you know where you're going to end. You probably know what the inciting incident is because you have to trigger. Sorry, we'll get into that word at some point because I think we need to rewrite that word a bit. It's got a little bit of baggage that I don't want it to have. You know what the inciting incident is because it's going to trigger that change, that move out of their comfort zone. But then there's the soggy second, as we've come to call it, or fun and games, which what on earth is that? And that's where more and more plot stuff is happening to the story. So this associated behaviors could be a place where you could brainstorm, if you're a brainstormy kind of person, what could be in that central, the biggest part of your book is in that fun and games part. Associated thoughts, associated emotions, positive aspects, negative aspects, examples from film, I really like that. Traits in supporting characters that may cause conflict. Bing, 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 because the novel is all about conflict, right? If you don't have conflict, if you don't have a goal that is in jeopardy, that it has really high stakes, you're just not going to have an unputdownable novel. You might have a novel, but it won't be unputdownable. Challenging scenarios for the extroverted character. Yeah, so this was about extroverts. So really, really terrific. Absolutely recommend that. Companion book that goes with it. As you can see, I like craft books, and I like how they bounce around in my brain. When you are writing your antagonist, you're going to want to look at this because your antagonist, which, as I said before, is a mirror or a parallel version of your protagonist, they have to be as complex. They can't be a cardboard cutout if you want your novel to be unputdownable. I'm going to tell you a story about this friend who died. So both of our fathers were in the army, and her father was an officer and my father was not. My father came up through the ranks. He started out as a sapper in the Royal Engineers and ended up an officer. But at the time that we knew each other, her father was an officer and mine was not. So we lived in apartment buildings and she lived down the hill in a house. And I spent a lot of time down in that house. Her parents were so glamorous, so glamorous. You could barely imagine a more glamorous couple. He was hunky good looking and she was gorgeous, beautiful, and she did really daring things like lie out in the sun topless, which, I was raised Catholic, that was just unheard of for my lot, and would put things like, butter and a reflector thing to get more sun. It was the 70s. You're supposed to have as deep a tan as you possibly could. And my friend and I would mix up potions in the bathroom. The parents were downstairs, and we would mix up potions in the bathroom and dare each other to drink them. So, a bit of shampoo and a bit of bubble bath, and because your matey's a bottle of fun, for any of you who remember that. And we stole soda from the basement. We didn't grow up with soda being around a lot. And we had a little pulley system where we put a bag down through the grate into the basement and pulled it up into her room. And then, we just thought we were so clever. Not as clever when her mother found the empties, but pretty clever. So, this was somebody who I spent a lot of time with and did a lot of stuff with, and whose family looked just stunning to me. Absolutely stunning. I mean, Hallmark movie kind of stunning. And it wasn't until later that I realized that one of the reasons that her mother was tanning so much was to hide the bruises. It turned out that while we were upstairs in the bathroom making these concoctions, her father, this gorgeous, gorgeous man, was battering his wife. This friend, when she was 21, went out. She had a fight with her mother, and she went out drinking. She fell down a flight of stairs, and she broke her neck. She might have broken her neck and been paralyzed from the neck down, or it could be that she injured her spine and the paramedics moved her and permanently severed her spine. It was never clear, but she held out that it was the paramedics, in fact, who had paralyzed her. Now, why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because based on the dominant misbelief of this character, my friend, her life story could go so many different ways. If we look at the positive trait thesaurus and we make her into an optimist and an extrovert, then her story is very likely going to fall into women's fiction or possibly romance. But she is going to struggle with what her life gives her, and she is going to overcome it in this uplifting way. If we make her into a pessimist who thinks that people are coming for her and thinks that because of her life experience, because she had a father who battered her mother, maybe she thinks the world is coming for her and bad things are going to happen, and so that arc is going to be really different. The foundational misbelief in her life would have been something around that pattern that she saw with her parents that then became an I am statement. The misbelief is always an I am statement. So it could be I am powerless. She couldn't stop what was going on in the house. It could be I am wonderful. How could she be wonderful? Oh, she's up in the bathroom playing games with me. We are having fun in spite of all this stuff that's going on. I am resilient. That could be I am resilient because even though this stuff is going on, I am making the best of it. So you can see how with this, it is a very tragic story. And it was very shocking to hear of her death. But I decided that I would use that story to try to illustrate to you how the foundational misbelief will fundamentally change your story. Okay, so this rock is a beautiful mottled series of greys, and I am dedicating it to my friend who passed too soon. And my question for you is, what is your main protagonist's foundational misbelief? Remember, misbelief is always an I am statement. I am not worthy. I am broken. Tell me in the comments in the Facebook page. And love your people. Life is very short.